meeting. Avicii, thank you so much for jumping on, even when you're at the airport. Okay, can you guys see my screen okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's do this. So first of all, thank you for being here. I'm very excited about this topic. As some of you guys were in the meeting yesterday, I gave a quick 5-minute promo already, and the first 5 minutes will be a little bit similar as what I went through yesterday. So first of all, I am officially the Division C Director for Toastmasters as of last weekend, and working with many other Speak division directors to continue to increase the program quality and members as well. So if you do have any feedback in terms of what other topics you want to hear about, let us know. We'll build it into our curriculum to ensure you guys have the best experience ever. And I'm also the president and club sponsor of Women L.E.A.D Toastmasters, club coach of Toast Now, and a very proud member of Speak. You can learn a little bit more about the Women L.E.A.D club on this webpage, womenleadtm.com. So today is one of our supplemental workshops hosted by Women L.E.A.D Toastmasters, and we will talk a little bit more about the presentation tips for non-native speakers. In particularly, I will actually separate the talks into 6 categories: mindset, learning, writing, slides, practice, and also present. If you guys do have questions, please feel free to come off mute and then just ask me, as I don't have a chat open right now. But I'm gonna get my chat open right here. Okay, great. Okay, let's get going. So for those of you maybe the first time meeting me, just letting you know that I am a non-native speaker. The more that you pay close attention to my grammatical mistakes, you will find plenty, especially in a free-form workshop like this or on a panel. But prepared speeches, I do much better. And this is my screenshot of essentially my first club, Cupertino Morning Masters, 7 a.m. Thursdays, where I got my first ribbon as the best speaker in the club, and I was very, very excited about it. But I definitely started with 20 plus some ums and ahs in the table topics and forgot my speech halfway through because of nerves, or just completely froze on stage when the red light came up. So I have experienced my fair share of failure, but thank goodness for this safe platform. 7 years now into Toastmasters, little by little, a little becomes a lot. I am now very comfortable in front of screens and represent our company as a customer or partners being filmed. And I interview with Silicon Valley CXOs and host any of the panels on keynote stages and things like that. And everything I learned from Toastmasters have set me up for today, this workshop, to hopefully share with you guys 30 tips in these 6 categories that will help you to become the best speaker that you want to become. So first of all, I would love to encourage all of us to think differently. Instead of thinking about you are a non-native speaker, like what I just did, introducing myself as, I would think of a word as multilingual, because many of you guys are actually master in your first language, no matter if it's Chinese or Korean or Indian, you name it, right? And some of you guys might be even working on your second or third or fourth language. So I think for those of you who have come this far, you know what it's like, and we are ready to put in the hard work. And I will be very proud to say that multilingual people, based on research, actually do significantly better in life as well. So good job, everyone. Give yourself a pat on the back being a multilingual speaker. And the second of all is be very proud of your accent. A lot of times when we come to Toastmasters, I do hear this often, is I want to get rid of my accent. And in fact, I think that's a wrong way to look at your voice. Instead, I would encourage you guys to embrace your accent, because that is part of your identity. And yesterday I was in Speak, I gave the speech on this as well, where many of you guys actually heard me talk about this communicate with mastery, like chapter 6. And in this chapter, there is one portion about leading in your second language. So I'm quoting the author JD right now, where he said, "Your accent tells part of your story. It informs the path you took to arrive at your current leadership moment, and it offers useful context to your peers. Claim your international identity and own it proudly." So there's a whole chapter on leading with your identity. I will encourage you guys to take a closer look at. And the next part is be absolutely open to feedback. And this is the coachable moment that we all need to be having this right mindset going in, because learning how to speak, learning how to write is a journey. And when I say what it means to be open to feedback, sometimes you may come back with a very short paragraph of text and it's completely red marked. And I will not interpret that as, this tutor or this mentor of mine just hates me so much. Instead, it's red marks of love and caring. So for example, this is one of my speeches I gave last weekend. And this speech on the left-hand side is exactly what I typed out. And I actually gave the speech exactly verbatim. It's a 2-minute speech. It's my election speech of asking people to vote for me to become the Division C director. I won, thank goodness. And for those people who are really good at listening to what I said, probably spot a couple of the errors here. So I honestly did not know I had errors. I thought this was a perfect speech until I met up with my tutor the following Tuesday, and she pointed it out that I had a couple errors. Like, for example, this is supposed to be a perfect past tense, right? So since we chartered on January 24th, I had led and not like I led. And here is the same thing. I have transformed. And here is, and this was an interesting one because I was like, wait a second, we're still using these promotional aspects, right? To promote things. Aren't I supposed to use like present tense and not like a past tense? And she said, well, did you start that? I said, yes, I did start that. So she said, well, if you have started that and that's your idea, consider using, we have begun using these ideas, and prior to that we never had things like these, right? So things like that is like nuance in sentences that sometimes you just need perhaps an English native or someone who is a linguistic to be able to help you out. And here I thought, you know what, connecting and empowering with you all is a lifelong journey. It's pretty good. But then she told me parallelism plus proposition needs to be further focused on. Like, it's not connecting. It's supposed to be more like connecting you or empowering you. But then like this preposition actually doesn't work for both of these verbs. So see, that is something that is hard for me to pick up. If you are not a native language, or if you're a multilingual speaker, I will highly recommend continue to work on, sometimes for me in my definition is elementary school English. And because you kind of just, you can't see it. It's kind of like when you first come into a Toastmaster, you couldn't hear the ahs and ums, the you knows in your speeches. It's the more that you practice, you started hearing it. The more that you write, you start seeing it. But if no one is giving you that feedback, it's hard. So I would encourage you guys to continue to redefine what open to feedback is, and continue to up-level that skill set. And then the next part is about learning, right? So the first one is enrich your vocab. And this one, I just want to share a story with my grandma who's now 70 years old, and she still have this little notebook that's like index card size. And she will write down like vocabularies and memorize it every day. It's just kind of like the word of the day that we have, and try to use that as much as possible in sentences. And she also told me learning vocabulary is one of her top priorities in her days, and she wants to become a better English speaker. So for someone like my grandma who's continued to learn as she ages, I think all of us should take that as an inspiration, if you will, to enrich our vocabulary, because finding that right word to describe how you feel and the storyline really will stand out in your speeches. And in fact, for those of you who maybe have not checked out Evelyn Lee, she is so great at using the right words and to tell the most beautiful story. So I'll encourage you guys to check her out. And she's one of the Toastmasters award-winning speakers. The next one is about finding speakers you like, which is kind of similar to watch the speakers in action in the next one, which I wanted to go into the next slide actually to take a look at right here. So this one is a YouTube video that I'm gonna see if I can manage to bring it up on screen right here. You guys still with me? I'm gonna share screen. If someone can shout out a little bit in terms of whether you guys can see it or not, that would be great. Can you guys see it okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna play this video a little bit, okay? And let me know if you guys can hear it.
I'd like everyone to close your eyes.
Did you guys hear that?
Yes.
Okay, and she said, I'd like you guys to close your eyes, right? Okay, for those of you maybe have like bad internet connection, open it on YouTube. This is a quick 10-minute speech. If those of you who can't see it, follow me and we'll take a look at this one specifically.
Now bring to mind a picture of a computer engineer, maybe typing away at a terminal. All right, you got it? Okay, now open them. I'm betting that what you thought of probably didn't look like this. Now, it's true, I'm past the age of playing with dolls. But when I saw that Mattel had created computer engineer Barbie, I got super excited. I mean, how cool is it that there's a mainstream toy telling young girls that they can be successful in the field of computing? I mean, it even came with this super cool book that was talking about how Barbie is creating a game to teach kids to play with computers. Except when Barbie's sister asked her if she can play the game, Barbie's response, "Oh no, I'm just designing the game. I'll need Steven and Brian to help me build it." What? You're telling me that computer engineer Barbie can't even code? On top of that, she needs the guys to save the day a second time when her computer gets a virus and crashes. My feeling of excitement became horror. It's true, women are choosing not to study computer science, but that choice, it's not made in a vacuum. It's a choice constrained by the reality of the world they live in, a world that tells them from a young age they do not belong. Some of those signals can be overt, like the case of Barbie's laughable computer engineering career. But some of them can be more subtle, like the case of Alana King, a Black female computer science major. Every time she went to the Stanford CS building, she would get asked, "Hey, are you lost?" Until finally she got so fed up with it that she wrote a blog post. "No, I'm not lost." Or what about the case of Isis Wenger? When she was featured on a recruiting poster for her company's software engineering team, the ad blew up with comments, but with people saying she must be a hired model and not an actual engineer. These stereotypes surrounding us since birth can have powerful effects, no matter how hard our conscious minds seek to reject them. Stanford psychologist Claude Steele coined the term stereotype threat to describe a situation in which an individual feels at risk of conforming to a stereotype. In his experiment, when African Americans were asked to identify their race before taking an aptitude test, they performed more poorly than white students. However, if you remove this race question, all of a sudden that difference all but disappears. And these findings have been replicated many times since. In a test of sports ability, white men perform more poorly than Black men. However, you frame it as a test of sports intelligence, all of a sudden that delta flips. If you remind Asian women of their Asianness before they take a math test, they'll do better. Remind them of their sex, and they'll do worse. I hadn't heard about any of this research before I started my first job as a computer engineer. But if you'd had asked me what effect I thought stereotypes around women in engineering could have on me, I would have said none. I graduated first in my class. I had several job offers, and I actually like nerd culture. I mean, I build robots for a hobby. I tell dorky Star Wars jokes, even though I'm the only one that ever laughs at them. And even though I was in the minority on my team, I felt welcomed from the first day I started until about a year into my job. I hit a wall. It was an assignment I just could not figure out. And with each failed attempt to crack it, I felt a little more of my confidence drain away. Until suddenly I found myself thinking the unthinkable. Maybe I wasn't meant to be an engineer. I thought about quitting every day. I didn't realize it at the time, but that right there was the power of stereotype. It turned what should have been a tiny setback into proof that every stereotype I'd internalized over my whole life was correct. I wasn't good enough. I didn't belong. I knew that I had to ask for help, and I knew it shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, my team was super collaborative, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. For me, asking for help, it meant becoming like Barbie. It meant admitting I'd failed, and I wouldn't just be failing myself. I'd be failing women everywhere. As one of the few of us, I stood for all of us. So I couldn't just be good. I had to be exceptional so that maybe I could disprove the stereotype that women didn't belong in engineering. Try taking that weight on your shoulders as a 22-year-old. I've read research by Carnegie Mellon at Carnegie Mellon with students there, and the experiences reported by women were eerily similar to my own. Many came in as stellar math and science students, but as they ran into challenges with their introductory programming courses, they too began to believe the voices they'd once rejected. Voices that told them they'd only been admitted because they were women. It didn't matter that they eventually mastered the material. They couldn't get it out of their heads. Of the women interviewed, half would drop out of the program. But of those dropouts, half were on the honor roll. These women aren't the only one paying the cost here. Businesses are missing out too. Companies that have more gender diversity have greater profits and greater sales revenue than their competitors. Studies show that teams that include women are more innovative and more productive than those that don't. So if we want to improve our business outcomes, keep women from dropping out of these programs, let's start by addressing the stereotypes that are turning off not only women, but anyone else who falls outside of the narrow definition we have of what it means to be a tech. To other women out there, please don't make the mistake of believing you're the only one struggling with these feelings. Ask for help when you need it. Get past what you're stuck on. And I guarantee one day you'll be that person for someone else. To those of you in the majority, we need your help too. Understand that even under a veneer of confidence, a person that you could reach out to is struggling against an invisible current that they may not even know is there. Know that even your simple nudge of encouragement can make all the difference. That's how I got past my wall. And finally, to everyone else, all I ask is this: be more mindful of the stereotypes that you unintentionally propagate. think about what it really means when you tell someone, of course you're going to get into that program. You're a woman. Or what you're really saying when you tell someone, you don't look like an engineer. The power of stereotype comes from repetition over and over again until the idea is ingrained within our culture, which means we're all guilty of contributing to the problem. To quote from a fellow TED speaker, the problem with our stereotypes around computer scientists, it's not that they're wrong. It's just that they're incomplete. There's space here for mathletes and athletes, cake bakers and robot makers. Let's start by widening our definition of what it means to be a computer scientist. So the next time you close your eyes, you can imagine Barbie coding alongside Stephen and Brian. And then together, we can all build a future in which we can live long and prosper.
All right, so that's, you guys are still there with me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I want you guys to,
Yes.
if you could come off mute and just share with me what's one thing that you guys like about that speech. And for those who may be shy, type it into chat window. After watching that, what did you like about it?
I liked how, so Devyani here. Hi.
Hi.
That was a great video. Yeah, I liked how she shared her story in the beginning, but tried to be even more inclusive at the end. She said, yeah, agreed, I was a nerd, but it doesn't have to be just that. It could be cake bakers, it could be anyone under the sun, it could be someone who likes Barbies. So that was the strongest message that I could take out of it.
So you honed in specifically on kind of the message, the storytelling, some very clever usage that she did. Abhijit said that we can all make a difference with repetition. Anyone else? Type into the chat. What did you like about that speech? Or even the delivery of the speech? I am not going to move forward until I have one extra comment or chat or voice. Very motivational. Awesome. I like her pace and pausing during the speech. Great. Awesome. So the fact that I'm bringing that up is actually, thank you guys. Thank you, Gigam and Suzette. I'm bringing that up is actually because sometimes when we are asked to watch a video, we just watch it like, it's someone else yapping again. And we don't watch it like very, very closely. And when I watch that, this is what I wrote. Because when I watch any of the videos, I'm trying to find the next person who I want to become. And can I see myself becoming that person? And is this someone that I maybe want to mimic? I watch a lot of Obama's videos and many other speakers. And sometimes, even though they're great speakers, I don't see myself becoming them. So I always love to say that, hey, what is the message? Can I quickly identify what is that one message? If I end up talking about this with someone else and someone else came back with a different key message, then I need to rethink, did I get the gist wrong? Or maybe the speech itself wasn't as good, right? And then there are a lot of things I really love. And this is my quick note. I'm literally just copy and pasting what I actually wrote. And that video was actually came from one of my mentor who asked me to watch about 10 other videos just to get a sense of which speaker I like to become. And I love the full circle of the Barbie usage. I love the great personal story about how she felt of the weight of the person stereotype on her, see, typos and as a 22-year-old, because this is just my notes, very, very raw. And I really love the way that she talks, very natural. She had very natural hand gesture. She addressed the audience, and none of them seems like fake. And she also knows the audience very well. She is in that audience where people actually embrace the nerd culture. If you're in a slightly different audience, perhaps she's not going to get that much laughter, right? And she quoted a lot of the research to add credibility. She had multiple twists actually in her talk, like with the Barbie, with her work and things like that, because you think she was going to do super well at work, but then she actually felt overwhelmed. And she ended with such a funny quote, which she planted the seed halfway through the talk as well: live long and prosper, right? Very, very funny. And I had to think really hard how I will ask her to improve if she maybe, if I was in her shoes presenting. I just thought the final part where be mindful of that stereotype you unintentionally propagate. She did that sentence very quickly and then went on to the next one. I think potential pauses could actually help emphasize that point. So this is active listening for me, because every single speaker that I end up listening to, I always kind of just use that evaluation mindset, just boom, 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 immediately came in. Is this a person I want to mimic? And what do I like and don't like about it? And this way you can further train your eyes and ears to become a better speaker. The more that you listen, the more that you write down, the more, many, many times of this exercise that you go through, the better you will become down the road. Okay. And then the next part is about writing. I'm going to stay on this slide for quite a bit. This is like, I think, the part that will actually make a lot of us stand out as if you continue to hone in on this. So the first of all is find synonym for words that you cannot pronounce. I have heard some of my friends couldn't pronounce like prerequisite or familiarity. Find words that are similar like that, that means the same thing, that you can better pronounce it, like for example requirements or familiarity, any words that you can actually pronounce, because sometimes some of our accent could be quite strong. If you have a harder time to pronounce that, it may impact people's understanding of your speech, so consider that. The next one is use transition words, because usually if you have transition words, people will realize, okay, one point is over, I'm now going on to the second point. On the contrary, similarly, nevertheless, however, therefore, in addition, all of those are great transition words, or in summary and things like that. And be mindful of overly polite language. I'm sharing this to native speaker or multilingual speakers, because a lot of times if you say things like, to be honest, we were a little upset with first quarter results, it may or may not actually resonate well with people that come from different culture. Just say it the way that it's supposed to be. For example, first quarter results was disappointing, right? That is not as polite, but is very straightforward. It really helps out people, especially come from multiple different language backgrounds, to be able to quickly grasp what you want to say. And then the next one is avoid idiom if you can. A lot of people end up like think that they're very good at it, ended up missing an S or the, and just the meaning completely changes. For example, hold your horses means be patient, which is very different from hold your horse, which is actually holding onto a horse, right? So things like that, if you are not a native speaker and it doesn't come naturally to you, I will either do the homework up front or just avoid it altogether. Colloquial, this one right now, we're on this one. This means like a word or a phrase that is not formally or used in the ordinary and familiar conversation. So for example, we sometimes will hear things like, we need to up our game. In fact, I actually said that earlier. And instead just say straightforwardly, we need to improve. Use different words that are less informal for people to grasp exactly what you want to say. And the next thing is jargon, right? So for those of you who are joining us that are not NSpeak, which means you're part of NVIDIA corporate club, GPUs may not mean anything to you. GPU for other people, for NVIDIA, we all know it stands for graphic computing graphic processing unit, but for other people, they don't know what it is. So instead of just saying that we're using GPUs to do X, Y, and Z things, you could perhaps use an analogy or further explain what GPU is before going to the next step. The next one is slang. Slang is another one where a lot of the millennials end up, I don't want to say only millennials, but many of us actually use as well. And we'll try to avoid that, which is a type of language that have words or phrases that's also very informal. And things like, for example, when we use a word lit, L-I-T, that means when something is very good, enjoyable, or exciting, but that's a slang. Like what you might hear people say things like, dude, that party last night was so lit. Where were you? Right? That person meant to say that party was very enjoyable. So change different words in the context that makes sense, especially if you are in front of a group, potentially come from different culture, different backgrounds, or if yourself is a multilingual person, just avoid it altogether because you may or may not actually understand that word have a couple of different meanings. Crutch words is what we're familiar with in Toastmaster, which is the filler words like the ums and the ahs, right? So those are the things, try to avoid them as much as you can. Acronyms, those are things, for example, NVIDIA AI Enterprise, within NVIDIA, we will say NVAIE. It's an acronyms of a long phrase, just so we can call it out a little bit shorter and we can say the words like faster. But in a setting where you're presenting to a larger group, where most people may not understand what that is, spell it out and explain it. Phrasal verbs, that's another one. That's the verbs that are combining with preposition or other words, right? Earlier, I talked about connecting and empowering with. Those are words that I think a lot of English as a second language or multilingual people have challenges with. For example, when you use the word run, right? Run down is very different from run into or run through. Do you use down, into, or through could mean completely different things. So I'll be very, very careful with which preposition you connect with the verb. In that case, run is a verb, right? And down, into, and through are the prepositions. So run down could be in a very bad position or exhausted. Run into could be, oh, I just collided with someone, something, encounter a situation. And run through could be you stab someone through their body or to rehearse, right? It all means such different things in a different context. So I'll be very careful every time that you have a preposition, perhaps ask someone who is really good with grammar or a English native speaker to say, does this make sense? Am I saying the right thing? Am I articulating the right thing? And then the next one is actually verb versus noun. And a lot of times, depends on the setting, not saying all of the times. Sometimes using noun is less effective than using verb. For example, the delivery of the package took place on Sunday afternoon by the post office. The delivery of the package, right? That's kind of like more leading with the noun. Instead of maybe we lead with more the verb, the active verb, right? To say the post office delivered the package on Sunday afternoon. It's shorter, it's concise, it still tells the same thing, but it's just much more impactful. And then you can also think about the active verb, right? The active verb are things like if you have a be plus verb, it's a passive verb. Use more active verbs because they can bring out the action in there. It's like, for example, passive as an example would be 5,000 apartments were rented by ABC Housing last year. Or use something that's more active would be ABC Housing rented 5,000 apartments last year. And I talk about a lot of things in writing. It might seem elementary for many of you guys because believe it or not, most of us are so good at taking tests. And remember that when my tutor pointed out that, hey, Renee, these things are wrong. When she highlighted it, I immediately just knew exactly what went wrong in that sentence because I mastered test taking in my culture, which was Chinese, and back in China when I had my elementary school there. But this slide, if you have a chance to take a quick screenshot before your speech, just run down the list to make sure you check mark all of them, almost like a cheat sheet for your tests, essentially, because a lot of times we just need that little reminder to put that glasses on again and look at your own essay or article or the speech that you're writing. Have I met all of the criterias? Does that make sense? Any questions about this slide before I go on to the next one? No questions? Okay, which one is something that you are not very good at that you hope to focus on more? Can you type it in the chat for me, please?
aparte kita buat apa?
Say that again. Oh, that must be an error. Idiom, okay, people are not very good with idioms. Okay, great. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Abhijit. Looks like idiom is actually one big thing for many people. Jargon, phrasal verb, awesome. Idiom, wow, idiom definitely is one of the top ones. Great, transitions. Awesome, transitions. Okay, great, awesome. I will be writing out a blog post with more detailed ones, information with every single one of these, but these are definitely good things to keep in mind when you write your next speech. Okay, active verbs, transitions, great, awesome. The next thing is about slides. So I am using slides right now, and I know they're actually in Toastmasters, we do have like certain pathways, elective projects where you get to use slides. In the corporate world in Silicon Valley, there's still a lot of organizations that do use slides, unless maybe you're Elon Musk, who absolutely does not believe in slides. But at least at NVIDIA and at many of the companies that I worked at and work with, all of us are master in slide creation. So with that, there's actually a lot of things to keep in mind, you as a non-native speaker, how to create slides that will help you deliver the message you want to deliver. So first of all is don't fill your slides with words. If you remember, you as a English learner, it's hard enough to like listen to someone and be able to understand. If you have so many words on the slides, it just takes time for people to really read through the slides. So don't put too many words on a slide. And then the second thing is put important phrases on slides. And this one is important because sometimes it might just be a quote. Sometimes it might be a big, bold number. For example, Bill Gates recently wrote a book about how to avoid climate change as an example. And he led with two numbers, 50 and 1, like how many tons of carbon are we producing every year, and we need to reduce that down to like 0 carbon footprint, right? So with that, the two big bold numbers, if I'm creating a slide for him to present, I will put 50 and 0 and maybe have like an important phrase and things like that, right? And when you are creating slides like that, it's also very, very important to think about the font sizes. So on the next slide, I actually put together, if you're putting like slide 16.9, which is this one that you guys are looking at, what type of font size you should put on the slide for people to be able to read from the second row in a setting where you're actually in person, right? So hold presentation versus reading presentation. Hold presentation means you are delivering that presentation on the keynote stage for people to be able to see in the audience. Reading presentation means that you are sending it in like a PowerPoint as a leave behind handout and things like that. So this slide, I will encourage you guys to take a screenshot, and for those of you who do create a lot of slides, keep this in mind. You don't want people to be like, oh, I have old people's eyesight, I cannot read what you're saying. It's just not good. Empathize with your audience and make sure that definitely put the font size that's readable for your audience. And visuals, the third one, and this one, have your visual professionally edited. Even like these little icons, it took time for me to find them. And these ones, believe it or not, Toastmaster International have these icons made. This template also came from Toastmaster International. So they look like very polished and professional. If you have someone who could potentially help you out with some of the visuals, definitely do that, because nothing is worse when the professional material have like grammatical or spelling mistakes. In fact, I'm going to go back to this slide. Can someone tell me what's one thing a professional slide creator would change about this slide? Anyone?
Too many words.
Okay, too many words. What else?
It's not alphabetical.
Oh, that's a good one. Not alphabetical. Great. What else?
There's the left boundary is missing for the table.
Wow, that's good eyes. Great. Left boundary. It's not here. What else?
You can
Categories.
categorize it. Yeah.
Categories. Okay, great. What else?
You can organize it by like the highest number of people wanting to make that change to lowest or most common
That's a
mistakes.
hard one. That's a hard one because I actually don't know what everyone will work on. And sometimes people may find all of them interesting. And like, if without asking you guys, I will have no idea all of you guys wanted to work on idiom as an example, or most of you guys, I should say.
The underlining is not complete underwriting.
The underline, could you say that one more time?
That purple color one is only showing for the 4 letters instead of complete word.
Oh, what you're
Is
talking about is
heading.
right in here.
Yeah.
That is actually a template from Toastmasters. For every single
okay,
one of them,
fine.
they have a slight little line.
Oh, a little line, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
So those
noun,
are
like noun is
last one.
singular word and the N is not capitalized. You have verbs versus noun.
Yeah, so what Ashutosh was talking about was one thing that's like one of my biggest pet peeve, which is sometimes if you have 2 words in here, right? And the second word, do you capitalize that or not? In here, most of my second words is actually lowercase, but this L, I ended up making a capital word. So this slide could definitely use a lot more improvement, right? And many of you guys have actually pointed out a lot of things that I actually haven't even seen or consider as maybe like top priority, which is really great because that just means that we are sitting among people who have keen eyes that can really be able to get to the bottom of what will make a slide really good. For me, if I were to remake the slides, when I talk about every single word, I will make it, maybe like animated. When I talk about synonym, when I talk about transition, then they will come up accordingly. I will make sure this is lowercase. I will have this line specifically. I will try my best to make sure every single one of them is one word instead of some is one, the other one is 2. I did try my best to categorize them actually. Like all of the verb related stuff is at the bottom and all of the things that are a little bit more kind of related to informal usage of language and things like that are in the middle section. And the top one is just ways to be mindful of audience's comprehension and things like that. That's the way that I categorize it. But like you guys said, you guys couldn't read my mind. Perhaps the better way to categorize it is to have those categories actually listed out on the left-hand side. So with that said, hopefully I drove home that, slide creation can very much distract people. If you do have important things to say, spend some time on slides as well. And then the last but not least is talking about the numbers, which earlier I actually already talked about, like, the 50 and 0. If you have important things to share in numbers formats, leave with numbers because a lot of times people do remember the numbers.
Question.
Yeah.
So like all of those points that you talked about, we did not realize it until you actually asked us to critique that slide. I don't know if a majority of the audience goes in with the point of view of critiquing the slides versus critiquing the talk that you're presenting.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You never know who's in your audience. Some people just have designer keen eyes that they will be able to see that like, oh my God, right there, she missed the period or something like that. And for those of us who are maybe in the profession of like product marketing or in the creative world or designers and things like that, those are big no-nos for us. In fact, whenever I need to create like PowerPoints, perhaps for our CEO, Jensen, for our VP, I always take a step back. I always give myself an hour time just to see, are all of these 16 points font size, are all of them the same? Do they all have a period? I always come back and revisit everything. I'm sharing that with you is hold ourselves to a higher standard because we can do it. When you actually start looking at the slides with the critical eyes, you always point out problems, and I would just encourage you guys to have that be part of the muscle that you continue to improve. But most people don't. But if you do have an audience, someone in the audience member that are, you might as well, to do the best work that you do. I don't know if it's true. I remember a couple years back, they said that Elon Musk said something about if you have a typo in one of your emails, you just get fired. So I don't know if it's that strict these days or not. And that further speaks to the point of why we need to pay close attention to details. So next thing about practice. I know we always say practice, 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 but I want to share with you a little bit kind of like tips and tricks on how perhaps non-native speakers or bilingual speakers really practice, right? The first one is practice one letter at a time. Depends on your language, there are words that are harder to pronounce, V or R, W or P, right? Like for Chinese people that I know about, like for us, we don't like to pronounce V with the teeth biting the lower lip, like V. We do not like to say that at all. And whenever we say it really fast and it turned out to be something just a little off. And then also we don't like to say, when we say like the, we do not like to bite our tongue, the. Like words like that requires practice, and one word at a time. If you can just keep saying it and slow it down, you will eventually get to a point all of these words are a lot more clear for the audience. So figure out which word or which letter you have a hard time pronouncing and try to practice that one letter at a time. And Abhijit is actually hosting another accent reduction workshop. I know I have told you guys embrace your accent and things like that, but sometimes when accent is too strong to a point that words are not enunciated, it's hard. And in that workshop specifically, I forgot her name, but she did such a phenomenal job of pointing out the different accents, some of the pitfalls and certain words that we just have a slightly harder time pronouncing. So I'll highly encourage you guys to check that out. The next one is rehearse. Rehearse with an experienced English trainer. And this is self-explanatory essentially, right? Like what earlier I showed you guys with my tutor, she quickly was able to figure out like the different things that I use, the words that I use, what I wanted to say that I didn't use the right words to say. Like we have begun using certain things to indicate that I initiated some stuff, right? So those are really, really good stuff to continue to keep in mind. If you do have an English trainer, fully leverage him or her right before a very important speech. The next one is about recording. I know we talked about recording in Toastmasters and always encourage all of us to record your own speech and watch yourself. I just want to share with you what I do when I watch myself, hopefully to give you guys a perspective. This was my speech right before I gave the talk on Saturday, the election. And I am very critical of my own speeches. So when I probably recorded myself like 10 times and watched all 10 of them and then pointed out like which part I need to improve. The first version was I just look like I was dead and I have low energy and I have to really animate my voice and gesture to be able to come up a lot, to dial up that energy level. And then after one thing after the other, then here are a couple other things that I started looking at. I started looking at myself, I was like, okay, I already have this gesture talking about, the Renee, RENEE on this side. And then I said we were able to become a distinguished club in 4 months. Do I like this on the left-hand side? And at first this hand was a little bit out of the screen, so I have to bring it in to remember, okay, if I do this, I'm actually within screen. And then the next version I actually started doing, because when I put out the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this side, I did something where I was talking about 1 and then I lowered it, and then I did 2 and then I lowered it, but then I lowered it really quickly. So then my hand started getting just blurred because of the frame of the video was not as fast. And then I started trying to like, what if I just keep it here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I was like, okay, that is really, really awkward. I kept it there the entire time. So then I started doing, okay, I'm gonna just do 1 and then keep it 1 second, 2 second, and then lower, and then do the second one. And then I also realized just with that, I sometimes especially like to forget the second one. I will do 1 and then I don't do the second one and I'll go to 3. So that's what I realized what I started doing when I watched myself. I was like, okay, like I need to improve on this gesture. And I also realized when I didn't have things fully memorized, I could immediately tell when my eyes started looking onto the screen for like, oh my God, what did I just say? What was the next thing? Instead of being completely focused, like right here into the camera, one thumb lower than the camera where I'm fully paying attention to the audience. So it's so obvious to me when I was not fully memorized, even though maybe to you guys, it's not, it still seemed like my eyes were looking straight at you guys, but I could just tell, and it bugged me. And I worked on memorization. The next thing that I realized was I like to do the side mouth thing where I like to pronouncing with one side of my mouth for a long time. I don't know why I was doing that. So I ended up having to open my mouth a lot more. And so this is another one. And then the next one is whenever I felt proud of certain things, I started having this little bit of a lifting my head. Oh, we're able to do it in like four months. Oh, a year. Like I was like, why am I even doing that? But the thing is, I would not notice that if I didn't see my Zoom video. And then the next thing was the final part where I talked about shine on you crazy diamonds, which is the tagline that I borrowed from Bronwyn SF in Instagram. And my head at first was like cut off here because I was too close to the camera. So I have to really dial back a little bit. So this is what I meant by record yourself and watch yourself, right? And when you watch yourself, be your harshest critics, because it's hard to watch yourself, first of all. But then the second of all is when you start training your eyes and ears, remember watching all of those TED Talks or whatever talks that you like to watch, compare yourself to those people. That's the fastest way you can improve, because you started knowing what you could do better. I hope that was helpful. I really put myself in a vulnerable state by showing you guys these screenshots of me. Okay, I have about 5 minutes left and I'm on my final topic, which is great. The final part is about presenting. First of all is prepare a checklist. There are a lot of things that could potentially go wrong. And during the last workshop, I actually shared a virtual checklist. I'm happy to share it again for those of you who are interested in taking a look at the virtual checklist. And then it will be great to know your technology, right? So for me, I right now have 3 screens. And yesterday, I in fact even have another phone as my 3rd screen to know where can I see the audience, where can I see my chat and things like that. When you are on stage, do you want a clicker and things like that? So know your technology full out. And the next thing is don't fear a moment of silence, right? When there are people in the audience are not saying anything, don't have their camera on, that's okay. Just like earlier, when you guys did not answer me about what do you like about that video, I'm just in a very zen zone. I will wait for you guys to engage with me before I continue. And I will encourage you guys to do that as well. And as you become more and more comfortable with yourself and want to have an engaged audience, that will be a very good way to just be okay with that silence. Because when everything is that quiet, people are like, wait, what did I just miss, right? Leverage that. It's almost like it's like a power that you can leverage. The next thing is read your audience. Right now, unfortunately, a lot of you guys, the cameras are off, so I can't really read you guys, and I don't know if you guys are resonating with what I'm saying, but use chats, use like thumbs up or emojis or whatever in the virtual environment. Try to read your audience to see if it's resonating. But if it's in a physical environment, right? Ask question like, was I clear? Should I repeat? Just halfway through your presentation, that would be great. And also pauses, pause early and often. When I say early is that early on, ask the audience to say, was that video clear? Did that come through? Was I clear? Before you just do the entire speech and towards the end to say, are there any questions? And one of the first question is, hey, we couldn't hear you. That would be terrible, right? And the next one is to speak slower. Ravi, many of you guys know, he definitely picked us up, like speak slower. When we did when we heard from the other world champion, I think his name is Brandon, he also has an accent. What he just said was, I just needed to speak slower. And he cut out like 100, 200 words of his speech just so he can fit an international speech within the time frame. So those are all of the tips that I have, you guys, in a summarized format. Feel free to take a screenshot here. And I will also send out the slides on all of the 30 tips that I have shared with you guys. For those of you who are interested in knowing a little bit more about the books that I've read and the content that I actually cited, here's another great screenshot. And for those of you maybe are not very good at doing slides, here are some good ones as well. And here are all of the content. So I want to thank you guys. We're about 1 minute away from the top of the hour. I will take a pause and answer any questions.
I have a question, Renee. Thank you, first of all, very much for a presentation. So I'm not sure if you mentioned in the beginning I joined unfortunately late, but I was more interested in how to enrich your vocabulary. And you mentioned that you have a trainer, right? So what kind of tips would you give for people who don't have a very large social circle, especially with native speakers, and would need kind of some opportunities to practice?
Yeah, so first of all, go to the Toastmasters meeting, and every Toastmasters meeting there is the word of the day. When you see that word of the day, try your best to say it at least 1 time or 2 times during that meeting, because that's a new vocab that you will likely be able to take on. And even if you just remember that one vocab and you go to that one meeting a week, that's already 52 more words that you will learn that you compare to if you don't do anything else, right? And the second thing, when I say the trainer, right, she just one-on-one with me. And I ask to be assigned certain types of homework. So for example, I'm currently reading this book, The Lessons of History, and it's a very complex book. It's very, very well written. And in fact, for me, the way that I learn the best is to pick out certain sentences that I like. And in the sentence, I ended up highlighting them. I was like, I want to write like this. And I want to specifically use this word. So then I will just start writing my next blog post for Toastmaster or whatever, and then just mimic the sentence structure, but then replace with words that's going to make sense for my blog post. And honestly, there's no shortcut to it. You just have to do it. You have to memorize the word, put it in sentence, say it out loud so your brain can hear it again, write it down, and apply it in sentences that you will likely go back and remember again. Does that make sense? Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you very much. Are you going to share your presentation, especially the books that you read?
Yeah, absolutely. I will share the books and this recording and a blog post on womenleadtm.com. And in the blog section, it should go up this weekend. You can just take a look at it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other last minute questions? If not, I can let you guys go back to your
Wait,
work.
Renee,
Yeah.
how often do you meet with your trainer, your English speaker trainer, to actually help with your
Yeah, I have 3 mentors in Toastmasters who are volunteers for me that want to see me succeed. They edit my speeches, so that depends on how often I give a speech. Usually it's probably 2 to 3 times a month. And on top of that, I meet with my tutor every Tuesday for an hour, and she will evaluate. She doesn't rewrite my stuff for me. She just highlights it and say, this is why it's wrong. And then she will assign me homework on working on that. I'm happy to share with you guys her info if you want. Her name is Peg. She's really, really great. She's a retired linguistic lady, and she's just super, super good. Send me an email. In fact, if I know sometimes it's vulnerable to ask for help, but if this is a help that you want to see yourself improved, send me an email and I am super happy to connect you with her. We're all here to watch each other succeed, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Toastmasters20@gmail.com. So this is my Toastmasters email. Did I spell Toastmasters right? Yeah. And send me an email. And I'm happy to connect you guys with any resources you want to learn more about. Okay, all right. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will hope to see you in our next workshop. And enjoy your Friday. Have a great weekend. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Renee.
Bye.